The Tale of Two Women. Chapter 1. The Two Neighbors. In the heart of a peaceful village called Larkwood, surrounded by lush green fields and a flowing river, lived two women who could not be more different from each other. One was Martha, a woman known for her kind heart and generosity. She believed in sharing whatever she had and helping anyone in need. Martha was always seen smiling, offering food to hungry travelers, helping the sick, and comforting those who were troubled. People in the village adored her, and whenever someone faced a problem, they knew they could knock on Martha's door. The other was Beatrice, a woman whose heart was consumed by greed. She never shared, never helped, and never cared for anyone but herself. Her house was grand, filled with gold and expensive things, yet she always complained about not having enough. She was feared rather than loved, for she was known to be cruel to those who asked for help. Despite their opposing natures, fate had made them neighbors. Their houses stood side by side, Martha's simple yet warm home, always open to visitors, and Beatrice's grand but unwelcoming mansion, guarded like a fortress. Martha often greeted Beatrice warmly, but Beatrice rarely responded. She viewed Martha's kindness as foolishness, and often said, "Kindness doesn't fill your pockets, Martha. One day you'll regret giving away what little you have." Martha only smiled and replied, "Happiness is not measured by wealth, Beatrice. A generous heart is never poor." But Beatrice would scoff and turn away, uninterested in such words. Life continued like this for years, Martha sharing, Beatrice hoarding, but fate had a plan that would soon change both their lives forever. Chapter 2. The Mysterious Beggar. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, a weary old beggar arrived in Larkwood. His clothes were tattered, his feet covered in dust, and his face bore the marks of exhaustion. He walked slowly, leaning on a wooden staff, and knocked on the first door he found, Beatrice's mansion. When Beatrice opened the door, she frowned at the sight of him. "Madam," the beggar said in a weak voice, "I have traveled far and have not eaten in days. Could you spare some food?" Beatrice crossed her arms. "Why should I? I work hard for my wealth, and I won't waste it on a useless beggar like you. Now leave!" she snapped, slamming the door in his face. The beggar sighed and turned away. He then walked toward Martha's small cottage and knocked gently. When Martha opened the door and saw the frail old man, her heart filled with compassion. "Oh dear, you look so tired and hungry," she said, helping him inside. "Please sit down. I will bring you some food." She hurried to her kitchen and prepared a warm meal. She gave him fresh bread, soup, and a jug of water. The beggar ate slowly, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You are very kind," he said. "Most people would have turned me away." Martha smiled. "Kindness costs nothing, but it can change someone's life." The beggar nodded. "And sometimes kindness returns in unexpected ways." After finishing his meal, the beggar thanked Martha and left. As he walked away, something strange happened. The tired old man stood up straighter, his clothes changed into fine robes, and his face glowed with wisdom. He was not a beggar at all. He was a powerful sage in disguise, testing the hearts of the villagers. And now he had made his decision. The next morning, Beatrice and Martha would wake up to a life-changing surprise. Chapter 3. The Unexpected Fortune. The next morning, Martha woke up feeling peaceful as always. She stepped outside to water her garden, humming a cheerful tune. But as she bent down to pick some herbs, she noticed something unusual near her doorstep, a large golden chest with intricate carvings. Curious, she opened it, and to her shock it was filled with gold coins, sparkling jewels, and precious pearls. Her hands trembled as she lifted a small note placed on top of the treasure. "For the kindness you showed to a weary traveler, the heavens have blessed you. May you continue to spread joy and generosity." Tears filled Martha's eyes. She had never cared for wealth, but she knew this treasure could help not just her, but the entire village. Without a second thought, she decided to use the riches for good, repairing the village well, helping the sick, and feeding the poor. Meanwhile, Beatrice was in her house, counting her coins as usual, when she heard the villagers talking excitedly about Martha's fortune. Her eyes widened with greed. Martha received a chest of gold? How is that possible? She's always giving away what she has. She doesn't deserve it. I do. Furious, Beatrice stormed to Martha's house and demanded, "Tell me, where did you get all this wealth?" Martha, still smiling, replied, "A kind stranger left it for me, as a reward for kindness." Beatrice's mind started racing. She remembered the beggar from the previous night. Could it be that he was actually someone powerful in disguise? If so, she had made a terrible mistake by turning him away. Determined to get her own treasure, Beatrice hatched a plan. That very night, she disguised herself in rags and set out on a journey. She would search for the beggar, and this time she would treat him well, not out of kindness, but out of greed. Little did she know that her selfish intentions would lead to a very different outcome. Chapter 4: The Greedy Woman's Plan. Beatrice hurried through the village, her eyes darting around, searching for the beggar she had once rejected. She wrapped herself in a simple shawl, trying to appear humble. "If I can find him and show kindness, he will reward me too," she thought, her heart pounding with excitement. She wandered through the streets until, finally, near the edge of the forest, she saw an old, frail man sitting under a tree. His clothes were torn, and his eyes looked tired. It was the same beggar from before. This time, Beatrice forced a sweet smile and approached him. "Oh, dear traveler," she said in a voice dripping with fake kindness, "you must be exhausted. Please come to my house. I will give you food and shelter." The beggar looked at her carefully. He could see the greed hidden behind her false kindness, but he said nothing. He nodded and followed her back to her grand mansion. When they arrived, Beatrice set a lavish feast before him: fresh bread, roasted meat, and fine wine. She watched him eagerly, hoping he would reward her with gold and jewels, just as he had done for Martha. As the beggar finished his meal, he wiped his mouth and looked at Beatrice with calm eyes. "You are very kind," he said slowly, "and kindness should always be rewarded." Beatrice's heart leaped. This was it. Her treasure was coming. The beggar lifted his hand and spoke in a deep, powerful voice. "For your generosity, you shall receive exactly what your heart desires." In an instant, a large chest appeared in the middle of the room. It was identical to Martha's, golden, beautifully carved, and filled to the brim. Beatrice gasped in delight and rushed forward, throwing open the lid. But instead of gold and jewels, the chest was filled with black stones and crawling insects. Beatrice let out a horrified scream. "No, this isn't what I wanted. Where is my treasure?" The beggar stood up, his eyes now glowing with wisdom and power. His voice echoed through the mansion. "You did not show kindness from your heart, but from your greed. True kindness brings blessings, but selfishness brings only emptiness." With that, the beggar vanished into thin air. Beatrice fell to her knees, staring at the useless stones before her. Her greed had brought her nothing but misery, while Martha's kindness had brought her true wealth. Not just gold, but the love and respect of the entire village. From that day on, Beatrice's mansion remained cold and empty, while Martha's home continued to overflow with warmth, love, and true riches. Moral of the story: true kindness is rewarded, but greed only leads to loss.